Howdy. Let's try again. When a speaker at Texas A&M says howdy, the tradition is the audience then says howdy. So let's try again. Howdy.
Howdy.
All right, thank you. Now, I'm Barry Lawrence. I'm the program director of the Industrial Distribution Program at Texas A&M. In addition to that, I'm the director of the Thomas and Joan Reed Center for Distribution Research and Education, which has as its research arm the Global Supply Chain Lab. Now, the meaning of that is that it is the only distribution research center in the world. I don't know if you knew this, but distribution is a $6 trillion industry, one of the largest parts of the U.S. economy. And you cannot go to any major university in this country and not find multiple manufacturing centers. We are the only distribution research center. Now, when I first started with the program, we were teaching out of books that were written for retail, written for manufacturing, or other services. There's nothing on distribution. And we had to teach it and say, yeah, but when you do this in distribution, it looks this way. And I can imagine how many speakers you've heard talk from different fields that don't understand what distribution is. Also, you probably heard a lot of talk from even ones that don't understand what it means to be in a hybrid between distribution and retail, or what two-step means, or anything else. So we felt there needed to be a body of knowledge out there that addressed the needs of the distribution community. Primarily because distribution was in rapid growth, manufacturing was going through and is going through painful change, and we're going to see quite a bit taking place. So over the years, we've done hundreds of projects with companies. So this isn't university research. This is similar to consulting, where we would go in, would work with companies in order to help them solve problems on everything from inventory management, it's always popular, to Salesforce deployment, pricing optimization, customer stratification, things of that nature. And we were able to take this information that we learned as we helped them apply these best practices and create this body of knowledge. Now, as this body of knowledge has evolved over the years, we kind of took the bull by the horns and said, let's not just be dependent upon what our partners tell us we need to look at. Let's look at those things that are going to be the next things that distributors need to be dealing with. So we partnered with the National Association of Wholesaler Distributors, the NAW, and we started studying in a progressive fashion whatever the leading thinkers in distribution were talking about. So the first major one was called pricing optimization, and I'll show you something from that. The next one was called optimizing distributor profitability, which was the first time that anyone had codified best practices in distribution. The third one was sales and marketing optimization, which was a field that was extremely weak in terms of its best practice development. And then there was this one, because what we did was we looked at it and we said, okay, we did all these projects on operations, warehousing, transportation, and inventory and things of that nature. We've now done pricing and sales and marketing. We've codified the best practices for operations, so what's left? Well, growth. And when you look at it, if you look at the problems you're currently facing, any problems within your organization now, a growth initiative is why you have them. If you have too much inventory, that was a growth effort. The wrong products, wrong placement of products, an undertrained sales force, any of these activities, too many facilities, operations that are not meeting return on investment requirements. Now, throughout our research, we continue to look at this concept of return on investment because that's all that matters. And as we looked at this, we found that there was nothing that the distributor engaged in that didn't go directly to the ROI equation. Our challenge was we didn't understand how. Now, further to that, when you start talking about growth, it got even more complicated because it's harder to take something that's new and then say, what's my return on investment? So, and I realize these graphics here are eye charts. Some of them will break into finer pieces. I've given you PDFs on the table here. And as you heard, LBM will also give you these as well. But if you'd like to get them from the university, then just shoot me an email and we'll also send them to you. When we looked at it, we found there's three major areas that matter. Generating growth, which is when you make a decision as to what you're going to do, whether you're adding a new product, whether you're going to train your sales force into a new area, a new activity area, or whether you're going to open a new operation or whatever. The next one is managing growth, making it a success. And then the third one is sustaining growth, keeping it going. Now, I worked for a company that exercised this activity in just about the worst fashion imaginable. What we did was we were bought by a holding company, and the holding company made the decision that what they were going to do is when we were sold to the holding company, our management team, a new management team packaged us and sold us, told the holding company that they were going to double our return on investment, which was interesting to us because we thought we were doing a pretty good job already, so we didn't know exactly how they were going to pull this off. The plan was that they were going to double earnings while maintaining the exact same level of assets. So our reaction to that was, that's impossible. So what they did is once they took us over, they introduced a new product line. The new product line was to take 30% of our business, it was to be 30% of our business, and it had such a high margin associated with it that if they could hold inventory the same, if the new product line met its sales objectives, and if we could maintain our existing business, that their numbers were correct. Well, they introduced the new product line. It was a success. It hit its numbers. It hit its margins. Looked pretty good. But now we ran into another area. The next area was, could we keep our inventory level the same? Well, if you bring in the new product line, you have to reduce existing inventory. Okay, now they had made timeline promises that they could not wait for. So they didn't want to go through a dialogue with all of the operations managers about whether this was going to work or not, or what could be reduced or what couldn't be reduced. They put a purchasing team in charge of reducing our inventories. And this purchasing team, we were all across the southeast, so the purchasing team didn't understand all of the various zones, you know the drill. And what happened then was they made mistakes. They made a lot of mistakes. And anybody would tell you, I mean, if you can sit here and tell me that there's 30% of your inventory that if you could get rid of it, you couldn't get rid of it and not affect sales, and your sales force may not agree. But I'd never worked in a distribution firm that didn't have at least 30% of its inventory that was contributing virtually nothing. In fact, in our studies, we find the numbers closer to 60%. So that, you've heard the Pareto rule. 80% of the sales comes from 20% of the inventory. You're familiar with Pareto? He's an Italian economist. Said 20% of the people control 80% of the wealth. Well, I'm here to tell you, Pareto was an optimist. 10% of your products are giving you 90% of your profitability. 10% or less of your customers are giving you 90% of your profitability. So as we did this study, well, as we went through this implementation, what happened is that they didn't get the inventory mix right. When they didn't get the inventory mix right, we started losing existing sales. As we lost those existing sales, eventually we started losing existing customers. The new product line was nice, but that wasn't why the customers came to us. They came to us for our core capability. So this process continued for a while, and what ultimately ended up happening was we continued going down and down and down, and they had to start cutting more and more into the inventory in order to hit the ROI number they promised the holding company. They would reduce the inventory, sales would be reduced. Eventually this started cutting into the sales of the new product line, which we absolutely could not have happen. So as this process continued, we kept going down and down. Now you start having problems within the organization based on human resources. Our human resource problem was we had managers running some of the largest operations in the world. We may have been a regional company, but we had operations that were the largest in the world. These managers just so happened to be in the same city as the holding company. Okay, well, if you're in the holding company and you're hitting your ROI number but sales are dropping, that's a red flag. What might you do? Well, of course, you're going to ask management, but you're only going to half believe what they tell you. So maybe you'll drop by one of the big operations and see, right? Would one of those 30-year specialists who'd invested their whole life in this company, might they tell you the truth? Oh, God, we can't have that. So what do? Well, you can't fire them because these top 5 people would be picked up by a manufacturer in a nanosecond. And then what's wrong with you would not only be known within your company, but throughout the industry. So what do you have to do? You have to put some heads on poles. Watch for mid-market managers who are stupid enough to criticize existing policies. Kill them. That's what we did. They went through and they fired people who were these mid-market guys who didn't know to keep their mouths shut. This was supposed to frighten the experienced managers. Of course it didn't work, and of course those people left us. And as they left us, the only thing that keeps good salespeople in place is good operations management. So we started losing our top salespeople. It was just a whirlpool going down and down and down. Eventually, when we cratered, we took 4 manufacturers with us because we owed them so much money. 1,000 people lost their jobs and their retirements. Mega disaster. Early 1980s, $30 million total loss. All because we couldn't get our heads around we knew how to generate the growth, we didn't know how to manage it, and we didn't know how to sustain it. Now, my favorite one is a friend of yours, Home Depot. You saw what Home Depot did, right? They bought Hughes Supply. So Home Depot goes out and buys Hughes Supply, and they paid 12 times earnings for Hughes Supply. The immediate reaction that we had, because we had people calling us from all over the country, our immediate reaction was, well, either Home Depot knows something the rest of us don't know, or they're stupid, right? Well, as we examined the problem, as we started looking at this, we said, let's assume that their financial people did their numbers right. So if that's the case, what were they looking at? Well, okay, you can just hear them thinking, right? Distributors have warehouses. We have warehouses. Distributors have contractors for customers. We have contractors for customers. So we can combine and reduce. Distributors carry more product lines than we do, carry more product, more SKUs than we do. Therefore, we can use that to pump up our sales. And at the same time, we are better managers of inventory. They really believe that, y'all. They believe they're better at managing inventory. Therefore, we'll improve this operation. There were a whole variety of things they were looking at. And you might think, well, okay, could it have been done? And the answer is yes, of course it could have been done. But it would have taken 4 to 5 years. Home Depot reports quarterly. So 2 quarters of bad earnings, the questions start coming out. Well, not earnings, bad return on investment. Question starts coming out. Within a year, the CEO of Home Depot has been fired, and Hughes Supply is being repackaged and sold off as a separate company, and the losses were phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. Makes what we did look like child's play. So when we look at this growth concept here and we start saying, how do we manage this process here? You know, we've got opportunity is usually what we're looking at, and we have to measure what we're doing. This is a big problem. People don't measure what they're doing, but you can look at your compound annual growth rate. You can look at how does this change your competitive advantage. Be careful with that one. Your sales force is always going to tell you that if we could do this, we would be so much more competitive. Then, what's the risk associated with this? And what sort of return on investment should you get? Interesting talking to people. This is fundamental. This is one of the fundamentals that we can't seem to get across to people. Ask your sales force, what's your inventory holding cost? What are they going to tell you? It's an interactive part of the program, y'all. 0? I don't know. Those are common answers. Most common one I hear is 10%. Okay. What do you think it is? Yeah, nobody wants to say that, right? Well, storage cost alone is near 20%. That's what distributors who measure it tell us. That's what distributors who measure it tell us. If you don't measure it, they're probably better at it than you are, okay? Storage cost alone is 20%. Obsolescence is what you should have written off, not what you did write off. It's inclusive of all discounting that you did. Got to be at least 5%. Insurance and taxes, well, depends on your products, depends on where you're at, somewhere between 2 and 7%. No, I'm already now over 30. But I haven't talked about money. What's the value of money to you? And it's interesting, you'll ask people, and people will say, oh, 9%. These are the people that get to pay 9% for money. And they think that it's just loan money. But you expect a return on investment when you borrow money, right? So when you ask them, say, hey, look, if you were going to open up a new operation, how long before you expect it to pay you back? Most people can answer that question very quickly. 3 to 4 years? That's between a 33% and 25% return on investment. Why is inventory any different? Why would your investment in inventory be any different than an investment in a new operation? And the answer is, it is different. Because inventory is one of the very, very few things you have that makes money. So it doesn't need a return on investment of 25 to 33%. It needs a higher investment, return on investment. So that being the case, that fundamental question, when you look at that risk quotient is, how much risk am I absorbing? Then what do I expect for return on investment? Then we got to look at our own capability. When you looked at what our organization went through, our suppliers gave us the products we needed. Our customers were ready to buy those products. Our shareholders were happy with the return on investment we were generating with those products. So what blew up on us? Our human and IT capital. First human and IT capital problem we had was we could not properly identify our inventory and reduce the right inventory. That was problem number one. But problem number one was really superseded by problem number two, which was we had, as a group, a pack of idiots for managers. Do I sound bitter? All right, so why? Because they couldn't tell the investor the truth. The truth is, we need a year to analyze and figure out exactly what inventory we're going to reduce. During that year, we'll knock out 50% of it through attrition sales, and then we'll need another 2 years to reduce the other 50% because that stuff doesn't move. Will we hit your number? Yes, we will, in year 4. Why didn't they want to tell them that? Well, you might say they didn't want to tell them that because then they wouldn't have gotten to buy the company. And that's probably what they told themselves. But the reality is they didn't want to tell them that because they didn't know. They hadn't bothered to do their homework. They didn't understand ROI. They didn't understand inventory management. They didn't understand market dynamics. They didn't understand branch management. They didn't understand corporate communication. I guess I am bitter. All right, so when we look at this capability management, we're looking at, can we maintain that gross margin? Can we maintain and hit an operating margin that we want? That, by the way, is in the numerator of the ROI equation. And can we manage our cash conversion cycle? That's our denominator. So we look at that cash conversion cycle, days sales outstanding, days of inventory, minus days payable outstanding. So there was our problem right there, was that days of inventory. Next, risk management. Were the opportunity assumptions correct? In our case, yes. Were the capability assumptions correct? No. We did not get our capability right. Was the retention strategy correct? Well, if we failed in capability, the answer to the retention strategy, retaining customers, no. So we weren't going to hit the return on investment capital, and anybody who'd done even a minor job of looking at it would have known that. So looking at generating growth, everybody likes to talk about this. As we studied it, we saw 9 different methods to grow. And I'm going to just touch on a few of them. 9 different ways that distributors grow. And there were 5 growth drivers that were key and core to this. When you blend your growth method with your growth drivers, there are best practices to capture that growth. And then there's methods. Organic development, which all of us do. Acquisition, which a few of us can do. Merger, which very few do. And strategic alliances, which to date have not gone well. We don't work and play well with our supply chain partners in most cases. But that's going to change. And then we can measure the whole thing. So these 5 drivers are what we were looking at. And you look at it, it's the industry dynamics. So you know the whole solar thing ran into an interesting dynamic. The interesting dynamic was the Chinese government decided that they were going to subsidize it and blow all the American producers off the map. And they were successful at that. So you do have to watch those to some extent, but these are 0-1 games. After 9/11, the U.S. government threw everything and the kitchen sink at the economy to prevent a worldwide depression. I don't question that action, but I can follow what happened. Because the kitchen sink was the mortgage money. And the building materials industry went through the roof from 2002 to 2006. The process ended up driving us up and up and up, and since construction is as much as 33% of the U.S. economy, you carried us through that time. But then, about 2006, there was too much inventory, too many homes, too many buildings, too many commercial buildings, too many contractors, too much distribution inventory, too much manufacturing capacity. In 2007, one major manufacturer in building materials looked at it and said, this doesn't look good. So what they said was, we were going to plan. We're going to put a disaster plan in place. Their disaster plan was that they felt that everything could crater, and if it cratered, they said, what's the lowest we've ever built? They were currently at 13 million lineal feet. The lowest that they'd seen in the past 20 years was 9 million lineal feet. That's what they planned for. In January of 2009, they were at 4.5 million lineal feet. Now look at what that's done. Industry dynamics to our supply chain. So, as we started coming out of the recession, what did we have? Well, as the inventory began to play down, as we saw less and less vacant homes, fewer and fewer commercial buildings, as rents started coming up and activity started going on, the demand for contractors hit. Not enough contractors. Okay? Contractors started returning to normal. That becoming unreliable and difficult to deal with. So the contractor market started going back to normal, and there was actually a compression to where there wasn't enough. But that can be filled pretty quickly. Distributors had gone lean. They brought their inventories down. So we bring our inventories down. Now what happens is the demand starts pulling up rather quickly. So logically, we would turn to our suppliers who've been able to ship in very short time periods. But there's not a whole lot of people out there who are anxious to give manufacturers a ton of money to build and bring those manufacturing plants either back online that they had to scuttle, or build new manufacturing plants if they got rid of that capacity. So they don't have the capacity to meet the market demand. Plus, if you're in a management team, if you're top management of a manufacturing firm in building materials market, you're not in a big hurry to get yourself back into that hole again. So what do we have? Rapidly rising demand, lower supply, and the distributor's caught in the middle. Good news is, margins look good. Bad news is, your customers are mad at you. So as we've gone through this process here, this is going to continue going on because the economy is probably going to continue this upward drift. That's about all I can give it. But the upward drift is enough to continue to drive this. Customer relationships. Customer relationships are key to any growth initiative. You have to follow your core customers because they're 90% of your profitability. I get people ask me all the time, when I go into a new territory, how do I forecast? I don't have any data or anything. You say, well, you can map it off of a previous one. Yeah, but this territory is unique. Well, okay, that's fine, but where are your core customers? And where are your potential core customers? Because if you can estimate your business with them, you've got 80 to 90% of your forecast. Supplier relationships are important. They're going to become more important as time goes on because the distributor and supplier are going to have to team up, as I'll talk about later. Your sales and marketing strategies. Unfortunately, in a lot of the building materials distribution arena, we haven't been very imaginative on sales and marketing strategies, often using retail models and distribution models that look like they came out of the 1970s. I've been into many operations where you walk in there and see, I know because I worked in those operations in the 1970s, and nothing's changed, except that the layer of dust is a little thicker, okay? So we've got to be thinking about how we're going to change that strategy, and then how effective is our sales force. When we look at sales force effectiveness, I know that these two together, sales and marketing strategy and sales force effectiveness, and I'm sure you've heard many speakers and you've read many articles that tells us that the whole world's going to be changed. It's all going to go different. Sales force importance is going to go down. We're going to be marketing everything through the internet, and you're probably sitting here thinking, boy, if that's true, and you have reason to believe it's not true because they said that 15 years ago and it hasn't really happened yet, and you really can't imagine contractors doing business that way. But the reality is are the sales and marketing dynamics changing? Yes, and I'll talk about that. On the other hand, the day that the sales force becomes irrelevant is the day that the small and mid-sized distributor disappears off the map. And I'll give an example from retail, because retail might seem like it would be the least likely to go down this path. Back in the 1970s, shoe retailers were everywhere. A city the size of Tampa, St. Pete would have had 100 independent shoe retailers in it. Now you'd be lucky to find 5. What happened? Well, the big box came in. The big box was Dillard's. Dillard's came in, went in the mall, hired the second string sales force from the independent retailers, and started offering the shoes at $2 less. It was exactly that, $2 less, no matter where you went, than what the independents sold it for. Then what happened, and they used the manufacturers to do this, the manufacturers gave them discounts because of their volume. So what ended up happening was the customers did free riding. They just went down to Dillard's and bought the product for $2 less after they'd gotten rich information about the product from the salesperson at the independent retailer. Within 4 years, independent shoe retailers were wiped off the map. Now, if you go into Dillard's or any of the big department stores, all the shoes are on racks. No professional sales force, nobody to inform the customer about the value of the product, the design, the workmanship, anything. No, that's all gone. So the manufacturing community lost their sales arm. The manufacturing community is now dealing with big boxes that will beat the living daylights out of them. The independents are gone. All of those salespeople who were middle class, this is pre-Al Bundy, all those salespeople are gone. All of that industry was turned out. So when you look at that, if we don't look at what's the value proposition of a sales force and maintaining the sales force effectiveness, I can't come up with a really good reason for the distribution community to be there. Everything goes big box. So some growth strategies. One thing we can do is we can study our existing customers. As we study them, we drill in deeper and try to capture a greater share of wallet from them. So this account penetration strategy, this is a very popular one. There are best practices out there like account gap analysis, looking across the customers, looking at what they're buying and what they're not buying of your product types. Another growth strategy, market penetration with new customers. Notice that there's a different set highlighted in each of these of things that you have to be considering as you do it. In this one, customer relationships aren't there because you don't have them yet, but you're very reliant on your supplier, your sales force, and your sales and marketing strategy, and of course the industry dynamics are going to come into play. So best practices, one of them could be a market gap analysis. Looking at what you're selling in one market versus another market to see if you can penetrate it. You can see with this building materials distributor here that some of the market gap analysis that we see, where we go from, we look at Sacramento in one area, we're actually doing business in food service, healthcare, education, federal government, and military in Sacramento, in one part of Sacramento, but another rep's not. So that tells us that this market gap may be driven by the salesperson themselves. Other market gap analysis, like if you look at healthcare or food service, clearly indicates that we've not developed the skills to be able to do the business in this area. Another growth strategy. So this is what I was talking about, sales and marketing channels things that's going on. So trying to figure out where the market's going to go in the future. Now, a lot of people look at this and they say, well, you know, this Buck Rogers stuff hasn't happened as yet. But, you know, Amazon.com went through 3 generations of investors before they finally made it. Not many of us get that type of investment capital to get started. In fact, no one does. But they had such a powerful value proposition that they got away with it. And long run, they were right. It worked. Now they wiped out major sectors of retail. Now they're looking at distribution. Now the key thing to remember here is Amazon.com is a distributor. But they're a big box distributor. Low service, but they're going to go after pricing. Right now they're wiping out the publishing industry. One of my publishers just went under because they won't let the publishers make any money. They've squeezed all the margin out of the publishers. And take a look at it. You can go online and find a new book on Amazon.com for $9.65. That tells you that Amazon has squeezed everything out. Everything. And where there is margin to be made, they're keeping it all. So under the circumstances there, this is a pretty threatening competitor. So I was in London presenting to a group of power transmission distributors, along with a big manufacturer that brought me there, and they were worried about Amazon. And so they started talking about this, and they were saying such things as, we have to be able to communicate with the customer the way the customer wants to communicate. In other words, we have to give them online capability. They said, we have to make sure that it takes very few clicks to get to actual purchase of a product. We have to make sure that the information on the site is rich. We have to make sure that our operations can respond to internet sales. And I sat there and I thought, my God, it's 1995. We're talking exactly like we were talking in 1995. And as a distribution community, we are still clueless on this issue. So finally, after they talked for a while and didn't have any good answers, they turned to me and I said, here's the way it works, y'all. You're going through generational change, so the internet's a reality now. But you have to look at Amazon and think about Amazon, like you would think about Home Depot. Think about Amazon. What are they? Amazon has 3 targets, and you're not one of them yet. Target number 1 is Grainger. And that is going to be a titanic battle. That's the kind of thing they write Greek legends about. It's going to be exciting to watch. And Grainger's going to win. Why? Because they're the specialist. The specialist always wins. But they have to be able to match Amazon's other capabilities. And they can. The second target is Home Depot. And they are going to hurt Home Depot. They're good at hurting retailers. Ask Borders. The third target is the undiscovered market. In the battle with Grainger, they're going to find the market that people don't yet know about. So I asked these power transmission distributors, I said, what's your undiscovered market? And I thought they would say, don't know, or there isn't one. But they immediately answered. They said, bicycle shops. And I thought, that's brilliant. Think about a bicycle shop. Small private owner comes in the morning, cleans a few things, works with his cash drawer, tries to get his receipts and everything ready for deposit. About 10, 11 o'clock, family comes in, buys a couple of bicycles for the kids. He makes no margin, no money. Then, guy walks in wearing one of these space outfits, weird clothing and everything. This is where he makes his money. What if he had the capability to see the world's top power transmission bearing packages capabilities? Could he sell it to this guy for $600, $700, or $1,000 to install on his bike because that guy just wants to see that bike fly? Sure he could. But he doesn't know about it because the power transmission distribution salesperson is not calling on him. And there's hundreds of these shops in any metropolitan area. So when you start looking at it, the undiscovered channel is an interesting thing for us to address. This blend that we see between catalogs, email, trade shows, and then how our sales force is going to react and how our sales force, what capabilities our sales force is being explored in every single distribution channel. And what we can't do is ignore this, and we can't think traditionally. We've got to think about what will change things for us. And that takes us to innovation. We have to continually innovate the value proposition. And the value proposition, quite simply, is why should a customer do business with us the way we want to do business? You got lots of customers who want to do business with you in ways you don't want to do business. So why should they do business with you in ways you want to do business? If you don't have a powerful value proposition that your sales force can deliver succinctly, not only will you not make money, nowadays, you don't deserve to. The value proposition, when we start thinking about it, means taking all of these capabilities that the distributor has and thinking about their uniqueness vis-a-vis big boxes, like Home Depot, like Amazon. How can we operate different from a big box? And one of the big things is going to be that capability of personal service. Now, I've already covered quite a bit in the managing growth part. I want to emphasize, go back to and emphasize again, this concept here. You have, when you go about growing, when you're ready to grow, you have your operating margin, and you have your working capital. Now, the working capital fits into the cash conversion cycle. Days of inventory, days sales outstanding, days payable outstanding. So I'm not going to address days payable outstanding because the rules are often set on that, although there is some negotiation and wiggle room happening nowadays that some manufacturers are considering. The big one is days of inventory, and the next big one is days sales outstanding. If you look at how fast you can grow off a 3 to 5% EBITDA, it's not very fast. On the other hand, if you look at the amount of money that you've got invested inside your working capital, that's your growth opportunity. So you have to bring the working capital under control. During the recession, most building materials distributors survived the recession by managing their working capital better. Coming out of the recession, it's the growth engine. Because the reality is, many of you I know own your own companies here, but those of you who don't, if the investor's not getting the return on investment they want, and those top two, operating capital's in the numerator, working capital's in the denominator, if you don't do a good job managing working capital, what is your owner going to do with the earnings? Keep them. Why would I give you more money if you can't do a good job managing the money I've currently given you? So that takes us down to the bottom part here, which is the invested capital. If we get a high return on investment, people throw money at us. One distributor that I dealt with was a small fishing distributor, reduced their inventory by 50% in 6 months. And he said that after that, his banks were throwing money at him. So, look across the operation, the distribution operation, and what we find is that we've got these categories that we operate in and how we're going to manage them. And I think the strong ones for building materials distributors to be looking at are the source, stock, the inventory itself, the selling function, and shipping. Those are the ones that we've got to put our concentration on as we start managing this ROI. Ultimately, it's our core customers that matter. These are the customers that do the most volume, they give us the gross margins, they are loyal, and they cost us little to serve. The rest of these customers are not going to get you to your goal, and the goal should be to move your customer from the lower left-hand part of that core customer to the upper right-hand. Now, salespeople will tell you that core customers don't live forever, and therefore we need to go into these other customer types and find our next core customer. Manufacturers will tell you that service-trained customers are essential to the volume that they need to be efficient in their operations. But that means you have a dialogue on those customers. So understanding these customers, understanding how to penetrate them, understanding how to build with them becomes key. On the supplier side, you want to see loyalty, you want to see strong performance in their deliveries, you don't want to have to throw a lot of services at them, and you want to have high margin and profitability. Your suppliers should want to be your strategic partner, and you should be seeking out the strategic partners who give you growth opportunities, have strong brands, but don't take advantage of the brand. This one up in the left-hand corner called vendor controlled, these are the ones that have a powerful brand and then try to dominate and control the marketplace with them. I could name a few names, but I won't. Now, I look at that and I say, these vendor controlled, do you need them? Yes, they've made certain of that. They've made certain that you cannot get by without them. But you have to maintain and be careful about them becoming the driver of your business. If your business runs off of their brand, you are vulnerable and you will not make much money because they've made sure the margin stays with them. I'm going to move beyond the cash conversion cycle pretty quickly because we've covered this. The key to the cash conversion cycle, work with your strategic suppliers, maintain your high inventories and your A items, keep the others very small, and have the core customer drive your business. Ultimately, we have to develop the capability, the capital and capability to do it. And the biggest issue I see in distribution is human capital. We have not invested enough especially in our sales force. I'd say the greatest challenge that we see when you look at the balanced scorecard, we understand the financials better now. We understand internal business processes. We do not do a good job in supporting and developing value proposition and the sales force activities. And the main challenge is we're not willing to invest in their development. Well, if you look at our organization and how we did sustainability, we encountered several risk factors. The root causes, some of them, almost none of them were in opportunity. These can be causes of damage. The big problem we ran into was capability. Most people see failure as coming from opportunity, missed opportunity, and they think that forecasting is the key. Where I see failure most often happening is the capability of the organization, because we don't train, we don't learn, we don't think. These are just some of the books. There's several others with the NAW in case you'd like to know more about the research we've done. Thank you all very much.